right. So it's coaches' obligation to empower, educate, and inspire their clients. And it's my personal belief that any fitness model that doesn't encourage an autonomous model of working with their coach is ultimately going to be a disservice to the client. So you have a big history with personal training, group classes, and now you've come into more of an individual design model. So I'm interested in, one, your thoughts around autonomy, and then second question is, how do you encourage autonomy with clients?
So, I mean, my first point is, I think that coming from personal training to this ID model definitely promotes more of the idea of clients taking more control over their training and just their health and fitness journey in general. I feel like personal training, group training, it was almost just very transactional. You show up, you have this appointment for 1 hour, you work with this person, and then you go home, and then it ends kind of there. And then coming into this ID model, we do take a step back, and we're trying to look at, all the pieces of the puzzle. But then, there's still like a big training aspect of, they still have like a program that they're following. So how do we thread this needle between, I want you to follow this program, but then I also want you to kind of learn about it and to be a little bit more autonomous and make your own training decisions, right? And I think it has to be like this like dynamic approach where, initially you're doing a lot of just learning and teaching with the client of like, these are what tempos are, these are what your positions look like. And then you help them kind of dial in intensity and things like that. And then as you're able to like progress forward, that's always kind of the next step is, how can I get this person to be more fulfilled with training? How can I make this person's training more meaningful to them? And I think a lot of clients definitely look for just kind of outsourcing that part of their life. They don't want to think about it. They just want the program there and they can just kind of do it. But I think it's a higher order of learning, a higher form of learning when you can kind of teach them, why we're programming these certain exercises or why you progress from 10s to 5s. And then when they learn that, they understand kind of where they are in this big picture of training, and they're not just looking at the week or the day, but they see the big picture. And when they see the big picture, they're able to make, better decisions based around their training of, all right, it's not there today. Just, take the weight down and just get in what we can. Like those kind of decisions.
Yeah. So education seems to be kind of the backbone of one of the things that you feel like is important. And if the client is educated, I feel like, one of the long-term goals that as coaches we should be doing, which coaches may feel a little uneasy about this, is ultimately we should be giving them the tools and the knowledge and the skill set to be able to self-manage in the future, right? We should equip them with these tools that help them understand frameworks for eating healthy in challenging social situations. We should figure out and teach our clients models and frameworks for understanding how to move and how to consistently integrate movement for long periods of time. So can you talk a bit about your experience with personal training and how you felt like, it's not a completely horrible model. It definitely serves a purpose. So I don't want to completely knock on it like that. But what were some of the good things about personal training, and where do you feel like it didn't really help perpetuate this whole theme around autonomy?
Yeah. So first, yes, I agree in that I love personal training. I love personal training for what it is and what it gave me professionally. Personal training did teach me to hustle, to work very hard, to give a lot of myself to this person. And it taught me a lot of how to communicate with somebody, how to push somebody, how to support somebody kind of in the training environment. And then I already forgot your question.
Yeah. So where do you feel like
this is hard? Personal
training fell short in encouraging autonomy?
Right. So I'll start with what was really good about it was, again, you're there for every single repetition of somebody's training, right? In that regard, you can dial them in exactly how you want things. You're with them from the time they are touching the barbell to their top set, and you're kind of dialing in that whole experience. And for that, in that respect, personal training is awesome because that person's getting a really good training experience, right? But then
who is that necessary for? Because that may not be necessary for, somebody who's been training for 20 years. Right. Like, do you need to watch them do, 4 sets of 10 bicep curls? So like, maybe you could talk about like who that is good for. And then, obviously we can connect the value that you're talking about with that specific client. So
yeah. So definitely more of like these people who, so to back up, it's kind of what I talk about with my clients all the time. It's this double-edged sword of health and fitness, in that there's so much info out there that you can pretty much look up anything and find the answer. But then on the backside of that, there's so much info out there that you can look up and find the answer to really any question from any perspective. So how is anyone supposed to kind of sift through and understand what is real things and what's just kind of this hoopla that's out there?
Yeah, what's truly applicable in this context for this specific person with all the answers on Google.
Right, and in that respect, having a trainer or a coach be the expert on that and apply those principles to the individual is super beneficial for somebody who's just getting started with training, so that they can just sort of learn, okay, this is how I know I need to bend my knees to squat, but this is how I specifically do it. And they're feeling things for the first time, and they're becoming empowered for the first time. And, personal training is really, really good in that respect. With those types of clients, you can make a massive difference in their life. Again, where I think it's going to always kind of fall short is kind of everything else. Training is 1 hour a day. They're spending, 23 hours doing something else. Therefore, the 23 hours they're putting in to anything else in their life is going to have a greater effect on progress, on their goals that they're trying to hit, meaning how you sleep, how you eat, how you handle stress, how you interact with people, what kind of social support you have. All that plays a bigger effect than that 1 hour training, in my opinion. Even if you're looking at things from a caloric expenditure standpoint, people are focusing on calories burned during this 1 hour workout, but everyone knows your non-exercise activity thermogenesis score is always higher than this 1 hour training. Yeah. And so, that's just always where personal training is going to fall short. And not to say that there aren't ways around it, but the ways around it are expensed by your time and your resources. If you have to take an extra 30 minutes to sit down with this client and really talk about their nutrition or really talk about sleep, that's awesome. But then that's 30 minutes if you're a personal trainer that you're not training somebody else and not making any money. Yeah. Or you're staying way later than your already long shift.
Yeah. And so by that proposition, it sounds like a lose-lose. The client, doesn't necessarily have the support from nutritional and lifestyle changes that they really need to be successful, because you're talking about the 23 hours outside of the gym. And then also the coach isn't being compensated. So it's kind of a lose-lose for the coach and for the client. And so making some assumptions here, I'm imagining that building in more of a consultative aspect to your work allows you to touch on the training components when you're doing program design, but you also have this medium to chat with them and give them support around nutrition and shifting their lifestyles. That becomes a salient piece of the puzzle.
Oh yeah. And in the consulting part, is where we're making all of our money, because again, it allows us to touch on the other aspects of life. But it also, again, it allows us to touch on training. And what that does is allow for that person to just, when they're on the floor, they are there to train, and they are there. They are following what's on True Coach. They're interacting. We're watching things, and we're having a great training experience. And then we can talk about principles and things in that consultative setting. So that way, it kind of separates our focuses a little bit, which is always really nice, because there's always clients that are going to want to know the why. Why are we doing this exercise? Why are we in this sort of periodization? Those are all great questions that I love to talk about in a consultative setting, because on the floor, I want to be training, I want to be moving. And so even in that respect, it's super beneficial. But then, like you said, when I have, a full hour or 30 minutes to talk with somebody about all those other aspects, we're really able to not only just create that awareness of what's going on, but we're building out different systems of, this habit stacking to kind of move them systematically to where they want to go. And then we're also building in different accountability aspects in there as well. And so the consultative piece has just been massive in terms of, my overall practice as a coach.
Yeah. So it seems like compartmentalization is really important. When we're on the floor, we're training, you're giving training feedback, movement feedback, you're pushing them to train more intensely. Sometimes you're pulling them back in case, they have some sort of feedback or something like that. And then you're compartmentalizing the other aspect, which is everything outside of the gym. And you're doing in that away from the gym in more of this in-office or kind of remote setting where you're able to have that dialogue and you're able to get those conversations going.
Yeah, and even just the environment shift is always going to help, dictate where that conversation takes place. If you get somebody who just does, a bunch of deadlifts and then they're kind of curious as to why they're doing, ABC, and then you got to take 10 minutes and separate them, and all of a sudden their nervous system comes down, they're kind of cooled down, and then they got to go back to training. That's going to take away from the overall training experience. But when you can kind of get, two people sitting down and just really talking about it, you're able to kind of dive in and take the conversation to different places where you might not be able to when you're on the training floor.
So I guess in both of our biased opinions, this is kind of like we're building upon personal training. And this is kind of the next evolution of like, let's take all the good things that we had from personal training, in-person detention, let's push them, let's give them feedback, but ultimately having a model that's going to be able to compartmentalize these different aspects and then also encourage training autonomy and really just autonomy with our own health and fitness practices really is the wave of the future. So I got one last question for you, kind of slightly off topic. If there's one thing that you wish clients really understood and would embody, what would that one thing be? Like if they could like deeply instill like one message that you've learned over the last decade plus of your work, what would that one thing be? Because I know you run into consistent themes, consistent challenges when you're working with people. And I'm curious if you have like just this one thing you wish people would understand.
You 100% get out of it what you put into it. Meaning in this model, you're working with a coach, and there's a lot of this open, honest communication about different things going on in their life and training and nutrition. And it's a lot of, with that comes the responsibility of kind of juggling all these pieces of the puzzle, right? And it's never easy. And, you get out what you put into it, meaning, if you understand that you have work to do on nutrition, you have work to do on sleep, and you're here to come and train, that's going to require a higher form of, intrinsic motivation and discipline in order to actually drive sustainable change to those areas. And so if you come in and you kind of treat this like a client would personal training as like this transaction, I'm paying for this service, I'm paying for this coach, and I expect results. That's just not the reality that we live in, you know what I mean? And so we encourage autonomy so much because the client needs to take that ownership, that direct ownership, and put in the work that is required in order to drive that sustainable change.
This brings up, I think, a much bigger issue too. It's like people come to work with guys like you and me because they want bigger biceps, they want to see their abs, they want to feel more confident and good about themselves. But ultimately, training is a medium to just be a better person. If I'm more confident, I'm going to be kinder to my wife, more gentle and nurturing with my kids. I'm going to be more patient in the boardroom. And I think what you're talking about is really like just taking responsibility. We need to take ownership that we play a role in the outcomes that we get in life. And until we accept the responsibility, in no way, shape, or form are we actually going to move forward in life by our actions. And so I think there's a big metaphor to just being a more badass human being here of like, if you can connect the bridge of like how training is metaphorical to life, I think that's the true message of what training is we're all on some way, shape, or form trying to become more conscious, more aware human beings. And if we can see and connect this bridge between training and how it affects the more grander plans, I think that's the big take-home message.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we encourage so much autonomy, or why we push autonomy so much, because like I tell clients all the time, I do not want to coach you forever. And if I do not give you the tools to take that ownership and to become autonomous with your training, then I haven't done my job.
Yeah. So then that probably goes to expectations. Imagine then one of the first thing you're saying is this very thing is right now we're kind of holding hands. I'm teaching you things. I'm counting reps. I'm giving you tempos. I'm doing all the stuff that you need right now. But ultimately, this is kind of like a child leaving home when they're 18 years old to go to college. Is we're empowering them, we're educating, we're inspiring them to take their own path in life so that they can be successful without the close interaction of yourself in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not to say either, like, we kind of hold hands and then we just throw you into the water, you know.
It's a progression.
Right. Well, not only that, but within the progression, there's a balance, right? There are going to be some things in training that the coach does want to be very specific. You know, if you're, you know, dialing into, if you're wanting to test a certain quality, you're going to have to follow a kind of certain progression that the coach is going to use their expertise and kind of lead you down this progression. So in that respect, it's going to be very specific, and the coach is really going to kind of drive the overall stimulus. But then the balance is, you know, okay, you did that, and you have, you know, accessory work, you have aerobic work. That's going to be the kind of stuff to where, okay, we got specific here. Now this other work, you just got to kind of get done, you know, and you got to be able to autonomously kind of be able to kind of go through those exercises and just get those and rather get the response that you know you need.
Good shit.
Thanks, dude. Woo! Only slipped up twice.